Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Resident Acuity is Reshaping Assisted Living Staffing. I'm McKnight's Senior Living Editor, Lois Bowers. We've got a great session planned for you today. We'll be discussing the trends reshaping workforce demands and the practical strategies operators are using to build more resilient care teams. You'll leave with insights for supporting caregiver well-being while maintaining high-quality resident outcomes, and more. We'll get to our discussion in a moment, but first I have some announcements to share with you. If you're having any audio problems with this broadcast, please first check the volume control on your device. This is the most common cause of hearing issues. The sound should be coming from your computer speakers. We'll have time for questions and answers near the end of today's discussion. If you have any questions about the information discussed, please feel free to send them directly to us at any time by clicking on the Questions and Answers tab on the left. Today's program is made possible by support from Sage. After this webinar, you can visit sagehealth.com to learn more about the company. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Danae Mierau is the Labor and Staffing Organization Lead at Sage. Holding a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree, she became a senior living executive and has almost a decade of hands-on leadership experience across rehabilitation, assisted living operations, and software-as-a-service technology serving the senior care industry. As a former executive director of a distressed memory care community, she led the community through a turnaround that saw staff turnover reduced from more than 100% to 42%, eliminated agency reliance, and achieved the highest family satisfaction scores in the community's history. In her current role, she works at the intersection of workforce innovation and senior living operations, helping operators tackle the staffing and retention challenges we'll be discussing today. Brandon Ribar is the president and CEO of Sonida Senior Living, where he also is a member of the board of directors. Before becoming CEO in September 2022, he was the company's chief operating officer, where he was instrumental in improving the operating model and navigating the company's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Brandon brings more than 15 years of experience managing large portfolios and implementing strategic initiatives across healthcare and real estate. Before joining Sonida in 2019, he was Senior Vice President of Operations at Golden Living, overseeing 305 skilled nursing facilities and assisted living communities across 21 states. He also held roles in operational finance and strategy at Golden Living, leading initiatives across skilled nursing, rehabilitation, home health, and hospice businesses. You'll find our panelists' bios in the speaker bio area on the left side of your screen, but we're all very excited about the topics at hand today, so let's move on to our discussion. Welcome, Brandon and Danae.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
You too. The first question I thought I'd start out with, when you compare today's assisted living resident to the resident of 5 years ago, what has changed most dramatically? Brandon, why don't we start with you?
Well, when you were talking about the amount of time I've spent in the industry over the last now 20 plus years, I think about all the different kind of stages that we've gone through, and even in the last 5 years, you think about now we're 6 years removed from the beginning of the COVID pandemic and what that's done and how that's ultimately evolved into our sector. I'd say that it is clear that on a broad basis, the acuity and the needs of the residents that are in assisted living continues to increase. I think what's really interesting is in some cases, we are seeing that the health and wellness of the overall 80 plus population is leading to very healthy residents who are in their late 80s or early 90s that are moving into communities, whether they're independent living or assisted living. And I think where that's really interesting is that those individuals 5 or 10 years ago may not have ever accessed senior living. So I know we focus so much on the 80 plus population when we talk about assisted living, but we're seeing people, while the acuity may be a touch higher, they're living longer, and with those wellness profiles, they're able to move into senior living where they may not have 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, Brandon, you bring up some good points here in that they are moving in maybe a little bit later. They are accessing assisted living. We only know it's a matter of time before acuity does catch up a little bit. And when we think about that acuity, it's really like, what does their mobility look like? What does their cognition look like? And it's taking those complex care needs like really one step further. It's not just about like the acuity or their complex care needs. It's really like, how does that translate into the amount and the timing of care that communities need to provide? And I know we'll get into this in a little bit, but right, it is that really that drives the need for how we staff and how we change, because those traditional staffing models really aren't going to be able to keep up with that rising acuity.
So how has that changed the way operators need to think about staffing? Brandon?
I think it requires us to be so much more sophisticated and thoughtful around how we design our staffing models and provide the not only appropriate number of hours to take care of residents, but that we also have flexibility in those numbers of hours, and that we understand when residents need certain things during heavier times of care throughout the day, and we can build in more flexibility around a 4-hour shift maybe in the morning or in the evening when you see these upticks in resident requirements. I think just the most impactful thing on our business is that we now have to invest in things to give us not the anecdotal feedback that we got in decades past, but the real-time knowledge of what's happening in our communities. And I think that's a must these days, so that you can evolve from a traditional ratio-based staffing model, if that's what you used in the past, to really being able to get the right individual providing the right type of care on a very timely basis to meet people's needs, and also to address those unplanned care needs that are going to come up when you're working with residents that do have significant acuity.
Mm-hmm. And Danae?
Yeah. I think Brandon nailed it. It really comes down to, do your community leadership teams have insight into labor insights? And when we talk about labor insights, it touches on a lot of what Brandon mentioned. What does care volume look like throughout a 24-hour period, right? And that is different community to community, resident to resident. Also looking at how are staff performing, right? Where do we need more education? How is first shift performing versus second versus third shift? And how does all of that really tie back to the community leadership's team ability to manage their labor budget, right? Because we want to meet resident needs. We want our staff to feel supported, but we also want to be doing it in a fiscally responsible way. And that's a lot to juggle for our community leadership teams. And a lot of times, right, when communities have access to these proactive labor insights, the bad things stay away, right? Or it's not like the first time that they're seeing something bad happening, meaning like their overtime is staying at a reasonable level. They're not having to use agency. They're not experiencing like going way over their labor budget. When we start to see those things, we often look back and we're like, oh, like we kind of knew something was coming, right? Like if they just would have paid attention to those proactive labor insights, they probably could have made a more proactive change.
Mm-hmm. So what assumptions about staffing no longer hold true?
I think I think there's so many assumptions. One that we understand exactly when care levels rise and fall, or what times of day, or what the impact of the mix of your resident has on the staffing model. Again, we used to rely on global assumptions, and we used to rely, and oftentimes you could rely on the knowledge of the leadership in the community, or the feedback from the leadership on the nursing staff or your CNAs. But I think when you now, and with modern technology, you kind of remove that level of uncertainty. It's no longer an assumption. It's just based on changing in the actual underlying need of the resident. So what does it allow you to do? It allows you to get out ahead of it versus being reactive. And our hope is that the future of staffing in this business is absolutely that balance between the personal, just the knowledge and the personal behavior, but also the data that you can gather to see how trends are evolving and be predictive and proactive. And that's how we'll get better and better, which is a necessity given, again, the changing and the heightened expectations that our residents have when they are accessing our services, in addition to the fact that the cost of those services is going to continue to increase in terms of what we ask from a rent perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to really sum up what Brandon said, it comes down to visibility and ensuring that we're investing in technology that provides that visibility. And what I love about, the labor insights and level of care insights that Sage can provide is it's very caregiver driven, right? We think of who's closest to that resident the most throughout a day. It's our caregivers, right? They are noticing these changes when our residents do have changes, are needing more care. We do need more staffing. And it's that visibility of all that work being done, providing that to the leaders so that they can make those more proactive changes.
And it also allows, the other important thing is it allows you to highlight success as a leader. I think, top performers, and if you have a commitment to retaining and developing and highlighting those individuals that are doing a great job, they welcome the visibility. They've always been doing a great job, and they've always been working, and maybe taking their unfair share of the overall responsibility. So now I think there's a bit of apprehension when you first come in, because you're saying, now we're tracking our staff, or we're tracking our team members, or they feel like, oh, they're watching every step I'm making. And that's really not the intent of it. The goal is to, again, highlight those that are doing a great job. The best performers will perform well no matter what type of technology you put around them. And it'll allow you to really highlight, pay, compensate, and recognize your best performers. And that's what we've seen in the years that we've been investing in staffing technology.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit more about resident acuity. Brandon, what does increasing resident acuity actually look like operationally inside a community?
I think for us, it increases the amount of training and development and the importance of how you retain and identify the right type of team member to match up with resident acuity. So, for instance, if the med passes are becoming more and more onerous because the number of medications that residents are required and that are taking has increased substantially, then figuring out how to match up that time and that resource with the nature of the med passes, and can you set those up and align them so that you can create, shorter shifts, if you will, 4-hour shifts if needed, versus having somebody that does a lot for 4 hours and then not a lot for another 4 hours. I think we look at acuity as also just how they're able to access services outside of our four walls. And so, are we able to get residents out and doing things like, going out and shopping and going to dinner and going to community events outside of our four walls? And that's a key indicator of whether or not acuity is getting tougher. If people are always in their units, if they're always inside the community and unable to access, really interesting and fun things outside in the market, that means that acuity is changing and evolving in a way that you're going to need stronger kind of clinical and ADL assistance type of an oversight. And we always want to be balanced. I think it's important that people can age in place, and that we do evolve to their care needs as they move up in levels. But it gets really tricky in this business if you are only able and only choosing to bring in residents that have really high levels of daily and hourly requirements. So finding a balance is the most important thing from our perspective.
Mm-hmm. And Danae, what are you seeing across the operators you partner with?
Yeah, similar to what Brandon and the team at Sonida is seeing. ways that this presents operationally, like we know every resident is a little different than the next, right? And two residents can be within the same level of care. Their care plans can present similar as well, but the time spent to complete those care plan tasks can be dramatically different resident to resident, right? So it may take caregiver Lois 3 minutes to help Danae go to the bathroom and 27 minutes to help Brandon, right? And if we don't have a way to so that can be, again, it really varies resident to resident. So capturing the time spent with resident in order to meet their needs is vital. Two is really acknowledging that there is planned care and there's unplanned care. We aim for our care plans to be completely accurate to what the resident may need throughout the day. But the reality is maybe, Danae is scheduled to be toileted 4 times a day, and that's, happening. But at the same time, the resident may be alerting to the staff that they need to go to the bathroom 3 more times. And so that difference between planned and unplanned care is important. And then again, the third thing I'll point is resident routines really change and shift. Community I recently visited, they were shocked when they saw, like, oh my gosh, our response time and our care volume time around 7 a.m. is increasing dramatically. And it was really driven by 3 residents whose routine just simply changed, right? They had lived at the community for a year. The staff knew that they liked to get up between 9 and 9:30, but they now were wanting to get up between 7 and 7:30 because they had to use the bathroom and get ready to go. And I think what that really pointed out is it was an easy labor shift. We simply just had a caregiver start an hour earlier so that we could meet those resident needs. Care volume returned back to what they were used to, and the residents were getting the care that they needed. So, long story short, these operational changes present in a lot of different ways, and it's important that we look at them and adjust our labor accordingly.
Let's continue on talking about operational effects. So where do operators most commonly underestimate the operational effects in your experience? Let's go back to you, Danae.
Yeah. I think it comes down to gradual increases, similar to the examples I just outlined. We're really good, or most operators are really good when a resident has a fall or a major change in condition. We do a reassessment, we update the care plan. But while that's happening, there's likely 6, 7, 8 residents that are showing these gradual changes that can really add up to the time being spent with the resident by the caregivers. I also think memory care. Memory care is a passion of mine. That is, I ran a standalone memory care community, and that transition is hard for families. And many communities, right, have assisted living. There's residents that likely are approaching the need for memory care. And before that actual change happens, they are requiring more time from those assisted living caregivers and staff. Redirection, ADLs take longer. And so that can impact, again, the operational impact of labor. And then, the last thing that we want to see is that we ignore all these warning signs and we see overtime, we see agency usage becoming the first signs of a labor problem, because a lot of times, again, there's warning signs prior.
Mm-hmm. And Brandon, how about you, as far as the most commonly underestimated operational effects?
I think Danae touched on speed to adjustment. I mean, that's the thing, is that the business is more dynamic than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. Things are moving and occurring on a real time or on a day-to-day basis, where you want to be able to react very quickly and again, get into more of a predictive and proactive model. I think the other piece that gets super interesting is that, especially if you've got a community with multiple product types, and we have many that, have a mixture of independent living and assisted living and memory care. And you couple that with the fact that the industry is evolving where the price points between those continue to widen. And so you could be looking at a $2,000, $4,000, $6,000 type of an impact around these changes in resident needs. And so I think operators tend to get, kind of behind the curve, and oftentimes things are happening that they're not necessarily adjusting to in terms of moving residents or, getting the right environment for somebody that maybe is ready to shift from independent living, maybe into assisted or even all the way into memory care. So I think that operators are going to have to continue to get the right types of information from their leadership and from their systems to inform the families of when those trends are occurring, so that, again, it might be a very material financial impact to somebody. And as operators, we've always kind of been hesitant. We've always been more conservative on well, no, they'll be fine for another month, or that person doesn't quite need that yet because I know the family and, and they can't afford it, or that's too big of a jump for them. So again, we need more and really strong information to help us make those, more real-time decisions. And operators we're still not totally there yet, but I think we're better than we've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think, one thing I would add there, Brandon, is if you have the data to show, like, this is what we're providing for your mom and dad, this is what we're providing for your spouse. It's not like, hey, here's what we're going to provide. It's, hey, we're already providing this. It's really powerful to bring to those conversations, and makes a not so fun conversation maybe a little bit easier for our wellness directors and executive directors.
Yeah, the senior living has always struggled with the fact that family members are super concerned about what happens inside of the four walls. And there's been this traditional concern around it's a black box and I don't really know what's happening, or I don't know how well my loved one's being taken care of. So I need to have a camera in the room, or I need, daily updates and things of that nature. And again, understanding that the consumer's perspective probably isn't going to evolve away from that. We have to be, again, out in front of giving them good information on the things that are happening within our four walls, because again, it's going to be a challenging stage in life. We know that, and there's great things that happen and challenging things that happen. But the more we meet our customer expectations ahead of time with the right type of information, just the better the reputation, the more positive the interactions are going to be. And that's been a big focus for us, and I know for other really strong operators as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you both had touched on maybe changing labor needs with changing resident care needs, and many operators believe maybe they might have to choose between labor costs and resident care. But is that really the trade-off here? Brandon, what do you think?
I don't think it is. I think that the reality of, again, our industry is that there's always opportunity to be investing in our strongest caregivers, recognizing them, and ultimately that's going to help you in terms of controlling your costs and controlling your overall hours. So if you staff in a traditional manner, which is turnover is just a fact of life, and I can replace that person with the next person, and I need X number of hours or X number of people per resident, you're not going to have control of your labor costs, and you will be at the whim of the market. But I think if you identify, invest, develop your really strongest caregivers and team members and service providers, and you develop them through your company, then your resident care is actually getting better while you're managing your labor costs. So do I think there's a correlation there? I don't. I think you can continue to improve resident care and manage your labor costs. But the last thing I'd say on that front, I do believe differentiation will continue to occur based on price points of communities and the rent. So if I'm charging somebody $15,000 a month in rent, then the amount of care hours and the amount of labor might very well be different than if somebody's paying $6,000 a month in rent. So there will be some correlation in my mind with with kind of maybe overall hours and the amount that someone's paying.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Danae?
Yeah, I love to answer this question with a no as well. But I don't want to undermine the work and the difficulty, like the difficult challenge that this is for our community leadership teams, right? It's easy to say, like, no, you don't have to pick between the two. But we also know resident needs can change in the blink of an eye, right? Staffing and labor management changes every 4, 6, 8, 12 hours for our community leaders when shift change happens. And retention efforts need to be happening every single day within those communities. And so we do see organizations that are achieving the strongest outcomes aren't necessarily spending more, but it is taking that full community effort to do the things that Brandon mentioned, right? Really invest in your teams, really track resident needs and resident care, and then train the community leaders on the tools that they have access to in order to make the best decisions for their community, which means balancing, right? Caregiver satisfaction, resident care, and then, the NOI of their community.
Yeah, but this is also, I'd say, just to add on to that, Danae, I think this is also where how you market your business and how you perform on the, if you want to call it the sales side or the resident acquisition side, is hugely influential. Because if you've got 10 to 15 move-ins every month, and if you start seeing that those move-ins have the same or higher acuity as individuals in the building, then you're by definition going to be putting more pressure, more hours, more requirements on your team members, and you are going to need to invest in additional care staff. So ensuring that you keep that balance of people that may not have as much of an immediate care need as those that are evolving in their care model, I think is super, super important to the model.
Good points. So your two organizations, Sonida and Sage, came together to tackle labor optimization, and I wondered what the primary goals of that partnership were. Brandon, we could start with you.
Yeah, I'd say from our perspective, it's delivering on kind of what I have spoken about earlier, which is being able to achieve greater visibility and better analytics and not oversight, but just a better platform to recognize great performers and to understand resident needs and acuity, because those are the two variables that are, I think, more influential than anything in this assisted living world. Is recognizing people doing a great job, and Sage has allowed us to evaluate and understand the performance of team members and how it's impacted by resident care needs. And then it's allowed us to have visibility into the needs of the residents that we can share with their loved ones. And that's probably, when we set out, those were the things that we felt were just absolutely requirements of any systems we were going to invest in, was could they kind of check those boxes.
Communication is so important, as you mentioned before, and that's never going to change. That's always going to be something that people are looking for and appreciate. How about you, Danae? What were the primary goals of the partnership from Sage's standpoint?
Yeah, I think aligning with Sonida on the problem that we're trying to solve together as partners. And that is, right, how do we acknowledge our top performers? How do we help our community leadership teams manage their labor budget better in order to meet resident needs? And so what that really all comes down to is taking a very, very complex, ever-changing problem like the world of clinical labor management, and taking that process that can feel very chaotic at the community leadership level and make it data driven, right? So really working with the community leadership teams to transform the way they approach and execute their staffing models. And how we've been able to do that alongside Sonida is really dedicating someone completely to clinical labor management through an embedded model. So I have had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with some Sonida communities over the last several months. and really bridging the gap between the tools that they have access to. Brandon hasn't mentioned it yet, but I'm sure it's coming. Sonida built an amazing spin tool that helps guide their communities to make great decisions throughout the day, and really marrying that with the labor insights and care insights within the Sage platform to make data-driven decisions in real time, right? So that you're always staying ahead of it. And so when I've been able to work with these communities, I really approach them as, I'm an educator, right? I'm going to teach you how to use the tools that you have, because a lot of our wellness directors were like, they went to nursing school, they didn't go to business school, and now they're being expected to not only provide great care, but also make sure that their retention and turnover is strong, and also manage a labor budget, and that is very challenging. Two, really, when I've been able to work with these communities, it's being an advocate for them. So to Brandon's point, right, when you have a month where 10, 15 residents move in, and also you're seeing level of care changes and those recommendations showing up in Sage and communities acting on them, labor is going to have to change, right? And so bringing that to the Sonida leadership team, they've been very open to communities needing more staffing when that resident acuity is saying that they need it. And then, the last thing I'll say here is, no one loves labor optimization, right? Like, they immediately think, as a wellness director or as executive director, if you're like, hey, we're going to do labor optimization, they immediately think like, you're going to cut my shifts. Yes, I know I'm over budget. And so really working with them to say, hey, we're not necessarily going to cut hours. Yes, in some cases we will. We're really going to reallocate the hours that you need to care for the residents based off of that care volume that you see right here in the Sage dashboard or see within Spin. And so once we empower our teams to make those more data-driven decisions, they're more confident in them as well.
Mm-hmm. Data
and I'd
is
say
really
that,
helpful.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead,
I would just say that, and it holds true for any technology partner that we've selected over the last couple of years, but Sage is one of the first, and clearly one of those that we use in almost the entirety of our portfolio. You've got to find those that are going to adjust and adapt as technology evolves. I mean, we weren't trying to solve for the problem as it was just today, but we were trying to invest time and energy with people and a team that had the expertise to adjust as greater kind of tools are influencing the business, or the obviously impacts of various forms of AI on our business, that they're investing in those kind of in partnership or ahead of you. That was a really important piece of checking the box. Was, again, if our Spin tool, as Danae referenced, and Sonida Performance Insight Navigator is the very long version that we never share with the wellness directors, because Spin is so much nicer and easier. But if you want that tool to be evolving, then you've got to pick the right technology partners to get the information into our systems.
Okay, great. Well, both of you described the model as data-driven and embedded. Could we talk more about what the results have come from that, Brandon?
Yeah, I think for us, the results that we most care about and follow through how do we measure success? So we measure success based on how it's influencing our employee base. So are we able to positively impact turnover because the systems and the training that we're putting in place, people want to use, and it creates more of a sense of stickiness across our employee base. So our turnovers come down over the last 4 years, each year by nearly 10 percentage points. And that's something that is near and dear to our heart. I think that our resident satisfaction clearly is right up there as well. And resident satisfaction comes from family members and how they perceive the care that's being provided. It comes from the reviews that are out there about each one of our communities. And it all flows back to kind of the visibility and the knowledge that we're able to meet the care needs of our residents. And so if you can get the team member piece right, if you can get the resident experience and the family experience right, then everything kind of flows through to some of the the more traditional metrics around how's your labor costs growing, what are you looking at, and how are you seeing just in terms of overtime dollars or the ratios of hours per resident day that are required. I think that's all the output at the end that you want to track, because that's the business that we're in. But the most important thing for us is, are we impacting staff retention and satisfaction and residents as well?
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Danae?
Yeah, I'd love to highlight. I know we've talked in broad and specific terms throughout this webinar. I'd love to spend the next few minutes really highlighting results that we've been able to driven at 3 specific communities. So I'll take like 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to do like a mini case study, highlight the community, these communities, because they've been a joy to work with, and we've been able to accomplish some pretty great things. So community 1, when I started working with them, they were exceeding their nursing labor budget by more than 10 hours a day. The wellness director was definitely new to the PRD staffing model, budget model, and so started there and started educating her on that, again, through the SPIN Sonida tool. But one thing really remained strong at this community throughout this process. Their care to their residents was extremely strong. You could see it. I went on site at all these communities. Their residents looked great. They complimented the community. Their response time was always under 5 minutes. But again, they were running over budget. And so we really did a deep dive of how we could reallocate the hours based off of the care volume that we were seeing within Sage Insight to really redo their staffing model. They were kind of stuck in that 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6 model. And we implemented some 4-hour shifts, some 12-hour shifts. And through all of this, the community definitely maintained strong communication to the caregivers of why these changes were being made, and that the data and the care that they were providing were actually empowering these decisions. And through all of this, the community's response time remained strong, less than 5 minutes. No caregivers quit. Their turnover actually decreased. And now they are hitting their labor budget, meaning that they were actually able to decrease their labor spend by about $180 per resident per month and maximize clinical care. So really want to highlight them. They've been a joy to work with. The second community I'd like to highlight was actually on the opposite end. So they were staffing under their budget, but about a month before I went on site, the caregivers on first shift had started to express some concern that they were genuinely having a hard time keeping up with the care needs of the residents, specifically at 7 a.m., 10 a.m., and 12 p.m. They were just feeling, strapped for time. And when I sat down with the wellness director, the data supported that. Over the last 20 to 30 days, just again, with those gradual resident changes, care volume had increased, alert volume had increased, and response time, the caregivers weren't getting there as quick as they traditionally had. And so it was really awesome to see, right? Caregivers are bringing this problem to us. The data supports it. We implemented changes to their schedule. So we were able to add an additional caregiver 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. when care volume declined or there was less to do, in 8 p.m. to midnight, we actually cut some hours there. And then they had also recently experienced an increase in census in their memory care and had some increased activity overnight. And so we were able to add a full caregiver in Magnolia Trails or memory care at this community. And really the best part of all this is we did this within their labor budget, and their response time to their resident care needs decreased from 8 minutes to 4 minutes. And again, that's something that this community is really proud of. And then community 3, another community that was exceeding their budget by about 7 to 9 hours a day. when we looked at this, and when I sat down with the executive director, their schedule, or what they were scheduling, aligned with their budget, but what was actually being worked was different, right? So we found that gap, the gap that we needed to close. And it was the shift transitions. It was shift, caregivers, nurses giving report. And that is a wellness director and executive director's dream, when caregivers, nurses actually do a thorough report at shift change, right? And so we didn't want to bring down their spirit, because they were doing the right thing, but we just had to have an honest conversation with them, and that, hey, we're going to actually schedule you for an extra 30 minutes at the end of your shift, but it can't exceed that, right? 80% of the staff at this community were staying 45 minutes to an hour after their scheduled shift time, creating a gap with, and them exceeding their budget. And so again, we were able to rebalance, educate staff. We did cut a few hours when care volume declined during second shift. And this community is now functioning fully within budget. And this all resulted in them decreasing their labor costs by about $95 per resident per month. So all this to say, it is possible. It is possible to use these labor insights to make impactful changes, not only on the financial side, but also to meet resident and caregiver needs.
Those are some great examples. Thanks for sharing those. Now we'll give Danae a little bit of a break. I have a question for you, Brandon. Changing gears a little bit, given everything we've discussed, how is Sonida preparing for the future?
I think we have learned so much in the last couple of years. One aspect of our business, and I think anybody in this world right now is thinking about how they grow and continue to expand. And for us, we've more than doubled the company in size, and so the investments that we've made have allowed us to successfully integrate new communities because of what we've learned from our existing portfolio, and then also, what we need to most immediately act on based on the characteristics of new communities that we're bringing on board. So I think, how we continue to think about the future is, what's the right model that produces the types of outcomes that make a Sonida community what it is and who we are and what we're proud of. And so whether it's an independent living standalone, it's a combination of assisted living or memory care, we feel super confident in the knowledge we've gained and continue to gain around how communities can run really well to take care of residents. And it's the only way, in my mind, you can scale in this world is if you have good, solid information around what's happening inside of a community, especially one that you've never run before. And so, as anyone who's done acquisitions in their lives has found, your assumptions are always wrong, and you always got to figure things out pretty quickly in some form or fashion. So I think we've really thought about what we've learned about our business model for the last 3 to 4 years mean for how we grow the company. So there's always work to do in the existing platform, but there's plenty of growth opportunities ahead. And then the last thing I'd say is that, again, my experience tells me that unless you're ready to invest as an operator, invest in time and resource that is spending almost their entire day dedicated to these types of efforts, it gets tough to move the needle quickly. And so, where we have chosen to make investments with partners, with Sage, and within our own business, to have people that are focused on how to train, develop, and invest in the right team members and identify outliers, the immediate result and payback is evident. And so I think just kind of using or investing in technology and then saying to all your regional operators or executive directors, hey, go check it out, go use it, it's going to be impactful. You'll get the good ones, they'll do a great job, and then those that don't use the tools well, you'll see zero impact. So I think being intentional about how to invest in the benefits of these systems is something Sonida has been really, really focused on.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations on the growth, by the way. Danae,
it's always
what
busy.
separates?
Yeah, a lot of fun. The team members are still picking up my phone calls for now.
That's good. That's important. Definitely important. So, Danae, what separates organizations making progress toward goals like the ones Sonida has?
Yeah. I'll keep my answer brief to this one. Building on what Brandon said, like investing in those leaders. And I'd really like to highlight the investment in our wellness directors. I think Sonida is doing a very strong job at really investing in those directors and empowering them to treat labor management as a part of delivering great care, right? Again, putting on that nurse hat and what they were trained and educated to do. We have a responsibility specifically to that role and the trillions of things that they juggle day to day to really invest in them and how to use technology, how to use these tools to make their workflows easier. And then again, like going more broad, just really empowering our community leaders with real-time data. We can't expect them to make quick decisions and data-driven decisions if they don't have the tools, right? If they don't have the data at their fingertips. And it's not just about more data, right? It's give us the data that we can actually take action on and that we find insightful to run our business, which is our community. And that's really where we've seen organizations separate themselves and perform stronger.
Mm-hmm. So everyone here today knows that turnover is expensive. What costs do operators often underestimate? Danae, I'll direct that one toward you.
Okay. I think if I asked everyone in the audience, like, what does turnover of one frontline caregiver cost? We would probably get 300 different answers, right? There's all these estimates out there. At the end of the day, it's expensive. It's hard to put an exact dollar amount to it. I think operationally where we see it, right, is continuity of care within our residents. When one person quits, it throws off team morale or how coworkers work with each other because they know that Lois takes care of these residents traditionally and is really strong at helping this resident. And so just really interrupting the workflow, not only of our frontline workers, but also leadership, right? The leadership team only has so much bandwidth. And again, a lot of these pieces, again, show up operationally before they show up financially, making it really hard to put that exact dollar amount on it.
Yeah, I'd add just from our perspective, I'll play the role of the skeptic, and I'll say that the training and development hours and the time for leadership to go out and recruit and replace somebody and bring them on board, that those are real numbers, but they're also those that sometimes don't show up immediately in the P&L on a month-to-month basis. The things that do show up are, did you have to hire somebody at 10% higher than the previous really strong employee because you're in an inflationary market and it's a tight labor market, and now it costs you more every pay period because you rehired at a 5-10% higher level. That's real dollars. On the other side, if you flip to the revenue piece of the world, what do residents and what do customers make their decisions based on in terms of how they rate your community, how they speak about your community, the reviews, your reputation? It's the team that you have, it's the caregiver profile, it's did Danae show up, to take care of my loved one consistently throughout the last 6 months, or were there 8 different versions of Danae? And so that directly drives your reputation and the volume and occupancy. And then the last piece is when you ask people for significant increases in their rent levels, if you have not provided consistency in staff, then you're going to have a heck of a lot harder time with people feeling like they're getting the value for the product that they're paying for. And so, if they get to see the same team member, if they get to build those relationships, then the reality of being able to ask for those increases that are maybe higher than they might have expected or than they've seen historically is far different if they have confidence in your team. And so those three areas: direct wage replacement, reputation that drives volume, and the ability to pass through a rate increase that people will work with you on. I see those as absolutely the three direct relationships between turnover and business performance.
Okay, great. So, Brandon, what other things have made a big difference at Sonida?
Oh, people. It's I just think that the future of this business is around continuing to evolve and getting the right information, so that our executive directors, wellness directors, our leadership that run the building, they're the most important in this entire company, and the caregivers in our teams, they matter so much to who we are. But I don't want any of them to be really good analysts. I really don't. I want more and more the information that comes from our systems to be able to guide them around the things that they can do to deliver the best outcomes for our residents and for their team members. And so, what's going to continue to build for the future is how we expand in thoughtful places and buy the right types of communities, and then how we engage and develop teams to run them really well. That's the simplicity. The beauty of this business is if you do those things right, then I think you're going to be really successful.
Mm-hmm. Good. I wondered if both of you could talk a little bit more about the connection between staffing and retention. I know we've touched on this a little bit, but Brandon, do you have anything more to say in that area?
People like to work with those that they enjoy working with, that work as hard as they do, and that recognize the work that they're doing. And so if, it's hard to convince a team member that they're highly valued if they are doing 80% of the work and their partner on the shift is doing 20%. That's the reality of human nature. So people want to be rewarded for the work they put in. They want to be recognized, and a great person doesn't want to be surrounded by those that aren't, as committed or doing things the way that they know are right. And so it's a big piece of how we think about retention and staffing.
Mm-hmm. And Danae, do you have thoughts to share in that area?
Yeah. I think it comes down to staffing and retention there's a strong connection between them, right? And I really want to highlight our caregivers here. When we give them the tools to manage their day and complete their workflows, but then go one step beyond that, right? It is the care and the work that they're completing. Yes, they're documenting it and we're capturing that information through their workflows and through the tools, but it gives our caregivers the opportunity to be seen, to be heard, to be a part of these operational decisions at the community level, and then be rewarded for them, as Brandon mentioned, right? Pulling from the last question, I'd rather give a top performer that 10% increase than have to rehire someone that's kind of a gamble, right? Hasn't proved themselves yet. And so again, the more that we can pour into our staff and make them a part of the solution, the hard solution of labor management, the better off we'll be from a retention standpoint.
So looking ahead, what should operators begin doing today to prepare for the next 5 years? Brandon?
I think that they should be spending a significant amount of time on how their building is viewed by someone looking for services in a market. And so the reality is that we know the demographic trends are moving in such a way that lots more eyes will be on what we do, and people don't have the patience to really dig in. They're in very challenging stages of their life or working on things with their loved ones. I'm certain that everybody on this webinar today has had conversations with a friend, a colleague, or somebody about how they're impacted by senior living and aging. And so the more that operators can ensure that the great work their staff and their team members are doing is reflected in how the community is perceived in their market, is going to set you up, I think, for incredible success. And then we're big believers that investing and paying, individuals at the top of the market and, or near the top of the market is the way that you can reward folks that are really doing a nice job. And so we reference it as investing in our best, and that's going to be something we'll continue to spend a bunch of time on. So we're fortunate we've invested in the systems and the partnerships 4 years ago, 3 years ago. So we're really working to get the most out of them in our spin tool. But if operators haven't taken the plunge yet to really get good insight into what's happening in their four walls, I think that's something they should be thinking about absolutely today.
And Danae, any advice for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I know we're running up on time, so again, I'll make this one brief. I think really understanding and measuring resident acuity continuously, not just at a 3, 6 month, 9 month reassessment. And then to Brandon's point, really partnering with the teams and giving them visibility. It's not just about more data. It's about like what's going to actually drive them to operate their community differently tomorrow than they did today. And these folks are busy, right? It has to be quick. It has to be in their face. I know what I need to prioritize today so that they can take action.
Okay, great. Another question for rapid fire answer. After all your great insights, but Danae and Brandon, I wondered if you, what would you say is the main takeaway message that you have for those people watching and listening here? Let's start with you, Brandon.
I think the main takeaway message is that you need to be identifying the right systems to put really special people in positions to provide great care to residents. And if you want to be if you want to scale up your business, then you have to invest in the right things that will attract and retain talent to run great buildings. And that today, more than ever, we have access to the types of information that helps families believe in the product, that helps residents in terms of when and how they receive care, and that allows you to really reward and incentivize the individuals that are providing those, those day-to-day activities of daily living. So you get a chance today to build a really special mousetrap and make it easier to recruit and retain great leaders in each one of our buildings. So that marriage between technology and people has never been easier, and it's something I think we're huge advocates of here.
And Danae?
Yeah, I think investing in systems and technology, as Brandon mentioned, to build on that, really investing in systems that give that holistic view of a community, right? It's easy to look at labor. It's easy to look at clinical care. It's easy to look at caregiver performance. Making sure that you have a system that really marries that information, because we know that they are all interconnected, will result in the best operations of a community.
Thank you. Well, let's try to get to one or two questions that have come in while we were speaking. The first one is, how is behavioral or mental health acuity being considered when managing staffing models? I'm not sure which of you would like to try to answer that one.
Danae, go ahead. You're the clinician here. I'm just the guy in the jacket. So go ahead.
I think definitely something obviously we need to consider, right? It goes back to our residents are coming to us with more complex needs. And we know that maybe it's a resident with cognitive impairments that are expressing behaviors as a way to communicate. When you're able to capture, again, that redirection, how long it's taking your caregivers to redirect, how long it's taking your caregivers, again, to complete maybe what we consider a simple task of, hey, I want to bring this resident to breakfast. If there are mental health things that we need to take into consideration, it likely will take more time. It likely will take redirection, and being able to document, one, how much time it took that caregiver to provide that care, but then two, also add observations, add notes at point of service is going to help that next caregiver take better care of that resident. And again, we can pull that data and understand when we need to adjust those care levels and those staffing levels.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
great.
the right clinical interventions, getting the right clinical interventions in quickly, and then understanding the overall environment within your community, so you you've got the right balance of personality types and needs, and that you're aware when those shift and get the right changes in place.
Thank you very much for both of you for answering that question. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions from the audience today. But the good news is, if we didn't get to your question during this webinar, someone will be in touch with you afterward to provide an answer. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their wisdom and insights in this session. I've been speaking with Danae Mierau, Labor and Staffing Optimization Lead at SAGE, and Brandon Ribar, President, CEO, and Board Member of Sonida Senior Living. Thank you both for being here and sharing your insights. And thanks also to SAGE for sponsoring this webinar. To learn more about the company, you can visit sagehealth.com. This webinar will be available shortly to listen to again online at McKnight'sSeniorLiving.com/071426webinar. You can use this address to watch again, and feel free to share it with your colleagues you think would be interested in this topic. Once again, this is Lois Bowers, editor of McKnight's Senior Living. Thank you all for being here.